Hello everyone, and welcome to my review slash thoughts on Soul Blazer, which I just finished my LP on. So if you don't know, if you didn't watch the LP at all, is a interesting little action RPG made by Enix back in the day. It's what people consider the first in the Soul or the Gaia trilogy. That's what people like to call it. So I personally didn't find too many connections between this and Illusion of Gaia, which is the second one, and then Terra Enigma's the third. But it was a pretty good game overall. The story was fairly basic I mean, it's an action RPG, so the story doesn't matter as much, obviously. It basically starts off where a evil wizard named Death Tool has basically taken over the land and sealed all the creatures up, basically kills them all, and as basically the god's servant, you come down to Earth, and it is your job to take care of business. So the first thing you'll notice right away about this game is that, I mean, the worlds, while some can be kind of generic, they're actually kind of cool. They're pretty varied. I mean, you'll have your generic, like, forest world or your water world, but they mix it up pretty frequently. You'll never get the same area too often, I feel. For example, one just takes place like in an ordinary house, but you go down below and there's pipes everywhere. It's kind of like a maze, whereas the water level, at one point you come up and all of a sudden you're on a volcano island. It's just things like that that kind of keep each world interesting, and each world kind of has its own little side story, kind of like in the overarching plot of it all, of how Death Tool happened to take over them. For example, you have Turbo the dog. I'm not gonna give too much away, but like Turbo the dog in the forest, who was the leader of the forest creatures, or you know, like Corrupt King or something like that. So overall, it was an alright story. A lot happens at the end that just kind of comes out of nowhere, and kind of one part of the story feels pretty forced. I wasn't really buying it at the end, but overall, I mean, for an action RPG, it has a fairly decent story, and kind of a cool one too. It really gives you an ActRaiser kind of feel, if you've ever played ActRaiser, where you kind of play this omnipotent being, like this god, and you're actually like saving your servants. So overall, I enjoyed the story. It served its purpose for sure. But obviously, for an action RPG, the main thing is the gameplay. For an action RPG, for the Super Nintendo, it was pretty good. You have your standard level ups, you get experience. I never felt like I was getting that much stronger with each level up. I mean, I think to me, the biggest thing is like my HP bar went up when I level up. That was like the biggest thing. But you do have attack, defense, and HP, the stats that go up as you level up. And they actually have, one thing I thought was pretty cool was the equipable items, you know, your weapons, armor, and of course magic. You know, they kind of broke the stereotype a little bit of, you know, here's a new sword, it's just straight up more powerful than the last. I mean, they still do that. I mean, each next sword you get is more powerful than the last, but each one has a special effect, which kind of adds a little bit of variety. For example, one sword will give you back a little HP for each enemy you kill. Another one lets you kill previously indestructible enemies. Things like that. So it kind of varies. It's the same thing with the armor. However, that's more for preventing getting across, like, I guess, gaps or you know, walls that you couldn't get past before. For example, there's one armor that lets you walk on hot surfaces, whereas if you don't have that armor, you just take a ton of damage. But it is doable to get past it without the armor. And the last thing you can equip is magic, and I feel like the magic was cool, but I never really enjoyed using it that much, for the main fact that on it never affected any boss except the final boss. And to use magic, you need to use gems, which you get from killing each enemy, and sometimes you'll find gems in treasure chests and things like that. But for the most part, it's just kind of to slaughter all of the random enemies, which were never really that difficult to begin with. And once you find your favorite magic, you're probably not going to switch off it too often. I think there's 8 spells in total. I might be wrong. I'll correct that if I am. But, yeah, some of them do some interesting things, but for the most part, you're probably just going to use the fireball that shoots straight ahead or the one that shoots in 4 directions. Until you get the last magic, of course. That one's just straight up awesome. Going back to the bosses are kind of like it was pretty love-hate with me. The bosses were definitely well designed, and they definitely stand out the most to me in the game. But some of them were very frustrating. The difficulty curve basically spiked every time you hit a boss. Like, everything is just completely easy. Like, you almost never die on any part but the bosses. But some of the bosses just have the most erratic attack patterns of all time. And sometimes it's just going to be trial and error before you get it. Either that or, like, extreme patience. Like, a crazy amount of patience. But overall, I mean, the bosses were well done. They were fun. I wish magic would have worked on them. I feel like it would have given magic more of a... I don't want to say purpose, because it was effective, but I feel like it would have helped, you know, make the magic more magical. But, so that kind of covers, like, the basic elements, but overall, I mean, what is the gameplay like? It's your standard top-down view, move in 4 directions, and just slash things with a sword. Almost Zelda-ish, anyway. In fact, he even has a, like, Link to the Past / Link's Awakening sword arc when you swing. And basically your job throughout each world, until you get to the boss, is just going to be find these monster spawners and kill all the enemies that pop out of them. And this is, like, probably one of my biggest gripes with the game, is that the spawners can sometimes spawn in so slow that you'll kill the enemy that you first killed, and then you wait like 4 seconds for it to spit out another one, repeat like 4 or 5 times, and then finally it'll be destroyed. And of course the enemies are invincible when they first come out too. But I mean, that aside, when you destroy a spawner, so to speak, you step on it, and this is probably my favorite part of the game, is when you do this, is, well, sometimes it'll alter, you know, the dungeon that you're in, but the coolest part to me about this game is that a lot of times when you step on that, you'll release one of the creatures that was sealed by the death tool, or you'll, like, you know, release part of a town that was originally there. And I think that's probably the coolest part, because eventually you're gonna hit roadblocks where you can't continue anymore in these dungeons, and so you got to go back to the town and talk to all the villagers you unsealed, get items. I mean, it sounds tedious, but I don't know, it's almost got this SimCity feel to me a little bit, where it's like you're kind of creating something. I mean, there's no customization, it all happens on its own, but it's just kind of got that fun factor. I don't know how to describe it. And it really turns you into the story a little bit too, because, you know, so many RPGs just tell you you're the chosen one and you're gonna make everyone better, but you never actually see it, or you never do it. Like, with each world's story, everything will pretty much be wrapped up by the end. Like, you actually see the impact you have on the citizens, I feel. Like, you actually get a sense of accomplishment that you're helping, you know, these people, and it kind of draws you into the story a little bit that way. I just thought the town building aspect was really cool, because you start off in this barren waste, you know, this barren landscape, nothing around, and you slowly just bring it back to life, which I thought was very cool. Some of the stuff that I thought, I mean, going back to the towns though, sometimes it can be kind of cryptic as to what you're supposed to do. I mean, this was Super Nintendo days, so stuff like this was fairly common, but for example, one of the things I noticed right away is, you know, you keep hearing someone talk about, oh, there's this thing underneath this flower pot that this boy really doesn't want you to get. And every time you go near it, the boy runs over, and you keep thinking, like, oh, maybe you gotta draw him away, maybe you gotta do this. And no, I mean, it took me forever, but all you do is just do a Zelda 1, walk into the flower pot for like 3 or 4 seconds, and then it just pushes it away and you get it. And it's things like that. Another example is you gotta get this harp string, and you hear one of the guys in town say, "Oh, I once knew this cool guy. He loved the harp. Too bad they threw him in a dungeon and slaughtered him." And I mean, based on that, you gotta know to like go in the dungeon and just walk over this. I mean, it's not like this is the only pile of bones in the dungeon, but you just gotta know to walk over this certain spot on a pile of bones, and you'll get the harp string. Things like that. It's those things where they get you frustrated just to the point where you're about to look at a guide. Like, you are like on the breaking point. You're like, another 30 seconds, I'm looking at a guide for this because I can't take this anymore. And then you figure out what to do. Like, it's all very doable without a guide, but it can be frustrating at times. And if there is some backtracking you need to do in the game, because as I said earlier, one sword lets you kill enemies you previously couldn't. But it really isn't that bad, because if you hit start, it'll tell you how many monster spawners you have left, and so you know if you've cleared the area out at all. You'd definitely have more backtracking, though, if you didn't do a thorough job of clearing out an area in the first place. Overall, I mean, I thought the gameplay was pretty fun. Like I said, the bosses were a standout. The town building was fun. Fighting the regular enemies was meh. It wasn't like super engaging. But the bosses will definitely kill you a few times, and they're fun though. Some frustrating, some fun. I mean, overall, pretty good gameplay for an action RPG for the Super Nintendo, and fairly fleshed out, I'd say, as far as the equipment and stats go, especially for the time. The audio for the game, which I'll be playing my favorite tracks from the game throughout this review. I really enjoyed the music. It was pretty good. It's got that, as I said earlier, I mean, it's made by the same people who did ActRaiser, so it's got that ActRaiser feel where it's kind of trying to be really epic, and I'd say most of the tracks really fit the theme of the worlds that they're in. Overall, I think the music was very well done, very enjoyable. Side note, if you have played ActRaiser, that did get pretty lazy with the sound effects. There are quite a few sound effects that are just copy-pasted from ActRaiser, which they're not bad sound effects. Like, unless you've played ActRaiser, you wouldn't know unless I told you. Like, you wouldn't be like, oh, that sound effect is terrible. It's just kind of funny that they just kind of copy-pasted things like that. The graphics, I mean, the Super Nintendo was obviously capable of much more, but I think this game came out fairly early in the Super Nintendo's life, and they're definitely, I mean, they're appealing. They don't look terrible. You'll see some palette swap enemies sometimes. Nothing too bad, though. In fact, actually, throughout most of the game, even the random enemies you fight will be mostly unique, actually, now that I think about it. So, yeah. If you're looking for a score, you won't find one, because I think scores are just silly. But this was just kind of a review / thoughts. Is Soul Blazer worth playing today? It depends. If you like action RPGs, you know, this one plays, I mean, the best comparison you could give it would be, it plays like Zelda, like the old top-down view Zeldas. And that isn't a bad thing. It was pretty fun. There are times when you may be bored going through the, you know, the dungeons, but I'd say the bosses make up for it and the town building makes up for it. It's not a must-play for the Super Nintendo, but it's definitely an enjoyable experience. So, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and for my next LP, I will be doing Castlevania 4. So, I'll see you guys then.